It's time for the Volquest podcast, where we dissect the biggest news items of the week.
Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast presented by our good friends at Smoky Mountain Organics, East Tennessee's number one trusted CDB health and wellness store. Visit one of their 4 locations, one in Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Sevierville. Their newest location is in Knoxville, right across the street from Trader Joe's. That's at 8018 Kingston Pike. They're elevating health and celebrating well-being with their CDB or CBD, pure essential oils, organic teas, soaps, and lotions. That's at Smoky Mountain Organics with Rob Lewis and Austin Price. I'm Brent Hubbs. Glad to have you along with us on this Tuesday edition of the podcast. It is Florida week, and Tennessee's a 3-touchdown underdog. Not exactly how Tennessee wants to draw it up. Rob kind of tells you where Tennessee's at in this process under Josh Heupel in year 1, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to be overly negative like AP is on the general's quarters, but I was a little surprised. I thought I wouldn't have been surprised if the line was higher. Personally, I bet Vegas has probably factored in a little bit of a Bama hangover for Florida, but yeah, I mean I'm really not trying to disrespect Tennessee. I'm just saying at the place where both these programs are at right now, and I was really impressed with Florida on Saturday.
What'd you like most about Florida? I mean, just their ability to line up and run the ball.
Well, and physicality on both lines of scrimmage, front 7, and I mean, when's the last time we've seen somebody almost triple up Alabama in rushing yardage? I mean, Alabama had 91 yards rushing on almost 30 carries, and Florida went for 245. That physicality on both sides of the lines of scrimmage is what really impressed me about that. That was eye-opening.
Austin, any chance Bama's having a drop-off here?
I mean, I think it's possible. Coming into the season, everybody was talking about how Nick liked this defense. It's one of his best defenses he's had in the last decade. And, he felt, really confident in a lot of areas. But, I mean, Florida in a lot of ways was one-dimensional. I mean, like Emory Jones, I mean, he was solid, in the passing game. But it didn't like he threw for a bunch of yards. They just ran right down Alabama's throat. I mean, they took a bad angle. Alabama should have got out of that one drive where Florida went 99 yards, and the kid, went for the pick instead of went for the tackle. If he goes for the tackle and takes a better angle, it's 4th down. They're punting. Instead, they go 99 yards, and it just kept the momentum going for the Gators. So, I don't know if I'm supposed to be positive or negative about, Alabama. I mean, it's all tongue in cheek, but I mean, like, it's so true. Like I said on the board, like we're too positive for some, too negative for others. The facts are, Florida is a good, solid football team. They have really good running backs, and it's not just the lead dog. I mean, they've got, a couple of different guys there that are really good. They're I think pedestrian at quarterback as long as Emory Jones is in. I just think, like, if he plays within himself, he's okay. When he tries to freelance and gets a little careless with the football, he's not. And so he played within himself against Alabama. We'll see if he does it against Tennessee, or does he think, oh, it's Tennessee, I'm going to have a big day, and he kind of gets careless again. This is a Florida team, though, that, can they avoid the Bama letdown, coming up Saturday night? I think because it's a night game, it gives them probably a better chance to avoid it. If it was at noon, I think you sleepwalk into that game a little bit.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Rob, what's if you're Tennessee, what's more concerning? The fact that Alabama gained less than 100 yards on Florida's defensive front, or Florida rushing for the yards they rushed against Alabama?
For me, it's Tennessee being able to run the ball on Florida, because I think me and you would agree that, and I think Tennessee will be a lot better when they get Cooper Mays back. But they put up some inflated numbers against Bowling Green that I don't think meant much. And then, the last 2 weeks have not been great. They've been okay. The numbers look good against Tennessee Tech, but I mean, you would expect them to. And, a bunch of that 202 yards came on Hendon Hooker scrambles. There were a couple of design runs in there that they get credit for, but even with Cooper back, I think it's going to be tough sledding for Tennessee on the ground, which with what they're they're getting a quarterback right now. Could make for a long day.
Yeah, this is a surprise to me. The last 2 games, Tennessee's tailbacks have 26 runs of 2 yards or less, and their longest runs is of 15 yards, which obviously is not going to be good enough.
Guys, we won 56-0. Okay, got to be positive, Hubs. Don't talk about the 2-yard runs. 56-0.
Well, I'm going to talk about whatever I want to talk about on the podcast. Here is what's going to happen. My question to you is this: regardless of what the scoreboard said last week, it's Florida and Tennessee's opening SEC play, and I know you're being tongue in cheek. What's a bigger surprise to you? Tennessee unsure in the running game, or not as good in the running game, or the fact that we're heading into week 4 and we're still having a conversation about who the quarterback should be at Tennessee? And look, maybe we're having the conversation and Tennessee internally is not having the conversation. But the fact is, through 4 games, nobody has really run away with the quarterback job, at least not in my opinion.
Well, until somebody does, I think everybody has to kind of take that wait and see approach. You know, and going forward, it doesn't matter if it lasts 2 years from now. Until somebody takes hold and runs with the baton, I think everybody's got to take a wait and see approach with the quarterback position. I thought that Tennessee would be able to run the ball way more effectively than they did a week ago. I just did you not think that happened? You know, I wanted Tennessee to throw it a lot because I felt like the passing game needed the reps. But I was surprised that Tennessee wasn't able to break off any big runs. I mean, like a couple of solid runs here and there, but they did not break off big runs against Tennessee Tech of all people.
Rob, there wasn't the gaping holes I anticipated a week ago.
No, I mean, and you talked about it last week. How many guys they have that were even over 270 pounds? I mean, they started one guy up front that was 6 foot 240.
Yep.
And had just had given up 78 points to Samford and Furman in back-to-back weeks. To not have a single 20-yard run against a team like that, I would have lost my house if you would have made me that bet before the game that Tennessee wouldn't have a tailback with a 20-yard run against Tennessee Tech.
Yep, I agree with you there. All right, Josh Heupel doesn't want to play in hypotheticals, but we'll play in hypotheticals. If Joe Milton is healthy, is he the starting quarterback for Tennessee this weekend, or is it Hendon Hooker?
I mean, it's like reading tea leaves, but don't you think it's Milton? I mean, just kind of the way, reading between the lines of what he's said or not said.
Austin?
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, like, I don't know what they're going to do. If you asked me to lean one way, I would lean Milton. But I mean, the fact that Heupel said I don't deal in hypotheticals, and Hubs, you and I watched him walking into the complex. For a guy that has a quote high ankle sprain, he had no boot on, he had flip flops on, and he walked with no limp. Am I lying? If I'm lying,
no. I mean, he did. I mean, he did. He was. I mean, he told me last week, passing him on the street, that he was fine. So again, I'm going to go off the premise that he's available. If he's available, is it Hendon Hooker, Austin, or Joe Milton? As a guess, not saying the absolute truth, but as a guess, what do you think?
I know I would go with Hooker because I feel like he played last week, and for me, that wins out.
See, I kind of lean that way too, Austin or Rob. Just the standpoint that, do you want to go into that environment down there on a Saturday night with somebody who hasn't played in 7 quarters and who wasn't lighting it up before he got hurt?
And I would go with Hooker. I'm just saying, I think trying to guess what Heupel is going to do. I think he's going with Milton, but that's a guess on my part. I go with Milton for the things you said, Hubbard, and also the mobility behind. I think
Hooker.
I don't think
you're going with Hooker.
Yeah, just because of the ability to make some things happen with his feet. I think the need for that will be magnified against this front seven, the way Tennessee's been blocking people.
And not to say that the whole JG coming off the bench thing was great, but I do think that if you go that route, maybe work Milton in at some point and let him watch from the sidelines. Maybe he sees something that allows him to come in off the bench and be more effective. I mean, again, at this point with the quarterback position, you're just throwing it all up against the wall and seeing if something sticks.
If Milton can really run the offense faster, is that a big advantage?
I think so, because I think it does temper the crowd, because I think that, you can potentially keep the defense and the crowd on their heels, and that potentially could help.
You think that's a schematic advantage, Rob? If they can go fast like they went Bowling Green fast in the first quarter with Cooper on the field, and
if they can string together some first downs. If not, they'll get their eyes beat in. But Florida will wear that defense out. It'll be ugly in the second half. And I'm not sure they can. From what we saw last week, I'm not sure how many first downs Tennessee's going to be racking up against that defense.
I'm with you. What's the importance of Cooper Mays?
I think it's big, man. And I wrote this today, and I know you said it, but I mean, with one injury, you got worse at two positions because Carvin had to slide over. He's not as good as Cooper at center, and you would expect him to be. And then Carvin's a starter at guard for a reason. I mean, the backups aren't as good as him. So you got weaker there at two spots. You got Cade playing. I don't know if he's technically out of position, but I think he's more comfortable inside. You got a left tackle that's never played there in college. I mean, it's not ideal.
Austin, you think they're significantly better with Cooper in there? Not that they're going to suddenly line up and run all over Florida, because nobody has, but is it a big difference, you think?
I do think it's a big difference. I think it just shows you how thin they were. Right. And especially if they go out there and they have success and they don't give up sacks, even if they don't run the ball that great against what is a very talented Florida defensive line, not the most talented Tennessee's faced from Florida, but still talented. I just think that shows you, how little depth they had, that they couldn't sustain one guy going out and just sliding one guy over and plugging and playing. I mean, it's not like they did all this moving around. They basically just shifted Jerome into center and then just went with Ollie Lane at first, and then, Kingston Harris after that. So for me, I do think it's a big deal. May not be a big deal in terms of rushing yards, but I think it's a big deal as far as tempo and continuity.
All right, let's flip it over to the other side of the ball. Talk a little defense for a minute. I don't want to say dumbfounded, that's too much, but I am really surprised at the way this defense has played through 3 games. And here's my surprise. It's the fact that they have seemed as in sync and as tied together at all 3 levels as they have been, without the apparent major bust. They've not played perfect. They've been bust. But there haven't been the major bust that I thought you would see trying to figure out a new defense in game situations. I haven't seen that. I mean, I'm really impressed with what you've seen so far. It's a small sample size. They haven't played great competition. I get all those types of things. But to me, they are far better than I ever anticipated they would be through the first quarter of the season. What's your take on the defense, Rob?
Oh, I agree completely. I mean, especially the front 7. I mean, the secondary, we only have one game to judge it on, but I was a little surprised they got manhandled by Pittsburgh like they did in the back end, just because you have so many guys who played so much football back there. And but up front, we've all talked about it. I'm way surprised at how effective they have been. And I don't care who you're playing. When when the teams are averaging 2.5 yards or a carry or whatever it is against you, your guys are where they are supposed to be. They're not, as you said, there's not been the obvious bust. And I've been impressed by that coaching staff. I think guys in a new system, as you mentioned, to not have the bust that you would just kind of assume would happen. And I think that's been pretty impressive. I've been impressed by the guys on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when you factor in that, Tennessee gave up 47 points on the year, 27 of it came in one quarter. And that means the other 7, they gave up 20 points. And I know Bowling Green, Tennessee Tech, I get it, but this is the same school that, just a couple of years ago gave up 30 plus points to Georgia State, on the defensive side of the ball in a season opener. So, how do you not be impressed? All the losses they've had, plugging in new guys from parts unknown at times, and they've really played as a cohesive unit. And, outside of that second quarter, and again, there are going to be quarters like that. There'll be quarters like that maybe this week, But I mean, on the whole, they've made plays, they've been disruptive, they've done a really, really solid job.
Is this just a result of simplicity and confidence, Austin?
I think the confidence. I mean, maybe simplicity, but I think more likely the confidence. I think that this defensive side of the ball has benefited as much as anyone from the team building, the building, and up of the confidence and the morale and all that stuff.
I think it's. I wrote this. It feels like what the offensive identity, what they want the identity of the offense to be, Rob, but they're not there. But you feel like you got a better idea of what the identity of this defense is through the first 3 games of the season, which I didn't expect.
No, same here. They've been very disciplined. They still, if there's a weakness or not, I mean, I'm sure they're not talking like these are, the 85 Bears. But
right.
If there's a something you'd like to see, maybe a little more established pass rush, maybe Byron Young, but brings that to the table. I think Tyler Barron could do that. But I think some of it has to be simplicity. Now, we're not sitting in the meeting rooms and, so we don't know exactly what it is, but think about, you got a middle linebacker who I presume is calling the signals, wasn't here in spring practice, played in, didn't even have the advantage of that. You got 2 transfers playing a lot of snaps in the defensive line that are new to it. And I just think it has to be more simple. We've talked about it on the podcast before, but I think this is your phrase, Pruitt wanted to be like the perfect defensive play call on every snap. And I think there were so many, checks. And if you see A, then you do B. If you see C, then you do D. And it feels like a lot of that's been eliminated.
Well, they're playing well, and obviously they got a much different challenge coming up this week. There's no doubt, but they're playing super aggressive. They were aggressive on Saturday with a lot of blitzes coming from a bunch of different places, doing a lot of different things.
And two of the COVID super seniors, I think, are a big reason. I think Theo Jackson and Matthew Butler are playing at a level that they've not approached previously in their careers, and I think that's one of the reasons that we're having this conversation.
Yeah, I don't think there's. Go ahead.
And I was just going to say, things get way more interesting for both those kids this week. I mean, they've feasted on the first 3 games, but now that we've hit SEC play, can they keep it up? That to me, that how does Theo do in space against a good slot guy, and then how does Matthew Butler do against an SEC offensive line?
Yeah, I think playing in space is going to be a real challenge and something that this defense is going to have to be really good at, because I think Florida is fantastic if they can get the corner on you and you can't close down space very well. That doesn't just go for Theo Jackson. That goes for everybody. But your point's well made, Austin. But when you talk about things out of the 56-0 win last week, my biggest takeaway defensively, I like the young players on this defense. Now listen, they're not ready to go to Gainesville and take on the world as some of those young players. But I think Tamarion McDonald can certainly justify more playing time for him moving forward. Christian Charles, Rob, seems to be where he's supposed to be all the time. Rucker makes a play. I mean, there are a couple of young pieces, particularly in the secondary, and that's a secondary that's going to lose a lot of parts at the end of this year when you talk about Theo Jackson and Trayvon Flowers and Jalen McCullough and those guys. If they move on, you're going to have to replace some guys there. But there's some positive takeaways with some of that youth, particularly in the secondary that we saw on Saturday.
Oh, yeah. And Christian Charles, I mean, it's not the secondary play, but I mean, you talked about this in the preseason. Those guys are going to have to show up on special teams. He shows up in the block punt and, already early in his career. And, McDonald's a guy we heard some buzz about last year. I mean, and it kind of incredibly came back and played when nobody thought he would with the shoulder. But, I mean, we have danced around it. I see those guys pushing for, like, legit playing time. I mean, I can see what Jalen McCullough did as a freshman happening to him at some point this season. when he pushed his way to the starting lineup.
It's a heck of an interception by McDonald, Austin. I mean, that was a really good football play that he made to undercut the tight end.
It was. And then when you look at Deshaun Rucker, we had Alante out on the locker room Sunday night, and I was talking to him before the show. And I said, what'd you think of some of those young guys? And he was very complimentary of both Tamarion and Christian Charles, but then went on to say, man, he really loves Deshaun Rucker. He's like, man, he goes, Rucker makes plays every day in practice. He goes, he's not there mentally, but he goes, he's going to get there really quick because he's picking it up really, really fast. And he goes, when he gets there, he goes, he's going to be hard to keep off the field because he's just really, really good. He goes, it's just a matter of, correcting little mistakes here and there that keep him, from pushing for more playing time. But clearly someone who's impressed a guy like Alante. And I agree. I mean, you really have Flowers can come back next year. McCullough can come back next year. I'm interested to see, if any of these guys, push those guys right out of the lineup because, I think Rob's right. I think that's very much something that could happen.
How they play, how they continue to play on special teams, how they push in the secondary is worth watching, not just this week, but in weeks to come. I like Muhan too at linebacker. I don't know if he can figure it all out, but whenever he decides to get somewhere, he's getting there fast and he's getting there with some authority. I thought he showed up a couple of times. I think he's been fantastic on special teams through the first 3 games of the season.
Do you kind of like him?
But I like his development.
But do you kind of liken him to the way Jalen Reeves Maven was early in his career? He was a special teams warrior and then started to figure things out linebacker-wise.
It's an interesting comparison. I don't think that's necessarily a bad comparison.
I'm not saying he's the same player. I'm just saying, like, how he's factored.
The pathway.
Size-wise, they're pretty similar. I mean, Jalen was a safety in high school.
Yep.
And
who had to add weight.
Kind of a similar skill set.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's the path to getting on the field, but I thought he took pretty good advantage of the opportunity presented before him on Saturday. I mean, he didn't play a ton, but I thought he showed up, just in the rewatch deal. I thought he was really flying to the ball. What do you make of the Aubrey Solomon 6 tackles?
I think it sounded pretty clear to me. I mean, Heupel was not shy about it. What was the phrase he used? His commitment inside the building, or something was. I gather that it was not necessarily talent or ability that was the reason he didn't play the first 2 games.
It was a buy-in.
Yeah, but 6 tackles. Did he buy in enough to be? Is the buy-in there enough for them to trust him in a rotation this weekend? I know it's Tennessee Tech, but I thought he used his hands well. I thought he showed up. Is there enough there for him to get on the field this weekend against Florida and trying to slow that run game down? And where is he in getting out of Rodney Garner's doghouse? Because I think it's pretty obvious to this point he's been in that doghouse because of that lack of buy-in. But he clearly looked like a guy who'd lost some weight on Saturday. We'll see if he's got more buy-in moving forward. I was surprised to see that it was 6 tackles. I thought he had a pretty good afternoon, but I didn't recall 6 tackles. I recalled a couple of obvious plays, but he obviously ran after the ball pretty well. So does Rodney Garner play him this weekend? It is intriguing to keep an eye on and something to watch moving forward. Is it hard, Rob, to trust those young guys this week? Is it natural instinct for coaches to go back to shortening the bench, so to speak, because you're on the road for the first time and you're playing in the SEC and you're playing against a Florida team? Is it hard to expect them to gain a ton of trust out of last week that they're really going to put somebody in one of those situations this weekend?
Don't you think it would be human nature for it to be easier for this coaching staff just because they don't have a history with the veterans? They've not seen them, they've not been with them in a foxhole. They've got just as much, experience with Christian Charles as they do with Jalen McCullough. Or, for me, I think it might make it easier for them because they don't have, that kind of shared history. I'm not saying they'll do it. I'm just saying I don't think they would be as reluctant.
Yeah, and I thought they were a little bit reluctant in the Pittsburgh game, but I didn't think they played enough defensive guys in that Pittsburgh game. So we'll see how many defensive guys they elect to play in this game. I do think one advantage Tennessee has going into this game is in the kicking game. When you look at Florida's numbers, Florida's given up some return yards. They haven't been dynamic in the kicking game to this point. I think Tennessee's has played the kicking game better than any phase of the game this season overall.
Didn't get into overtime last week because they missed an extra point.
Yeah, I just don't think they've been. I don't think they've been very good. I think Tennessee has an advantage, even though it's on the road. I think Tennessee has an advantage in the kicking game, particularly with Velus Jones and his ability to return kicks. And I think what Tennessee's been able to do in kick coverage to this point has been really impressive. So there's an opportunity for Tennessee to win that phase of the game, which, if you're looking for hidden yards and you're looking for yards in this game, you want to get all of them that you can. They need to win every opportunity in the kicking game.
I mean, they've been, and I just mentioned a minute ago, they've had a block punt once in their first 3 games. They've been great. They've been great in coverage to the point where Pitt just went with a fair catch every time after the first couple. Your punter is one of the best in the conference, and we talked about it last week. I think having Chase McGrath kind of show you within the first couple of weeks that he was solid has been a really nice development.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, a couple other quick things before we get into just a quick thing on football recruiting. A couple quick questions there, and then obviously some basketball recruiting as well before we wrap up the podcast here. If you're in charge, if you're the commissioner of college football, what do you do about officiating? What do you do about targeting based on what we saw last weekend? And officiating, we're talking about Mississippi State, Memphis debacle. Penn State has to punt on 3rd downs because you can't count downs. Reviews don't seem to make any sense. I mean, Rob, there's millions of dollars on the line in this deal here. I mean, what if you were the mysterious, created position of college football commissioner, which doesn't exist, which probably needs to exist? What do you do about what you saw on Saturday?
I mean, the biggest one to me was the Mississippi State game. I mean, I think you've got to have somebody in a booth somewhere who has the ability to just buzz the crew and get that one right, because that was egregious. I mean, you can just a lot of them, like, does Auburn win if they don't get called for the targeting call down on the goal line against Penn State? I don't know, but Mississippi State wins if they don't get screwed on the punt return. I mean, you got a couple of different, not just the fact that they downed it, but the fact, and the ref was moving in, waving his arms, blowing his whistle, but also, they had 2 guys with the same jersey number on the field. That has to be able to be fixed somehow. Just that play right there. The targeting stuff, it's a really complicated issue. I don't have an answer for that or what I would do, but things like what happened in Mississippi State, somebody somewhere has got to be able to hit a buzzer and say, whoa, we got to slow down. Here's what happened.
All right, before I get to that, quickly for both you guys, should targeting become like a basketball flagrant 1, flagrant 2?
Yes. I mean, I think everybody's been talking about that for several years.
I think that's a great point, Hubbard.
Is the Penn State Auburn play a poster child for that? Okay, if you're going to call something there, you can't throw that kid out of the game. I don't think you should call anything, because if the Auburn player doesn't hit him, he scores because he's diving forward and his knees aren't on the ground. But aren't we to a point now where we've got to have flagrant 1, flagrant 2, as opposed to throwing 4 people out in the first half of a game like we saw in week 1 when Ole Miss was playing against Louisville? I think we have to fix that rule somehow, some way. I understand. Yeah. Austin, you don't take it out of the game, but don't they have to fix it somehow?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because ultimately, and did they change the rule this offseason where the kid doesn't have to leave the sideline?
Yeah, but what's the point in that? I mean, he can't play. I mean, so he can stay on the sideline. The strength coach doesn't have to go to the locker room with him. Okay.
Yeah, my point being is it makes no sense. What was the kid from Auburn supposed to do? He dove, kid from Penn State dove. It's not like he can go, oh, I'm about to target, and now all of a sudden, and I I guess I should have just let him score. You know, I mean, like either you're playing football or you're not. Like they've taken this and turned it into, you know, where somebody's gonna get hurt playing too defensive.
Yeah, I think you got to address it. My last thing on that before I get to the two recruiting questions I got, and I've just got two for you, is my biggest issue with officiating is the replay booth. The inconsistency out of the replay booth is more maddening than the inconsistency of the guys on the field during live action. The game is fast on the field. I understand missing some things in live action, but when you've got the opportunity to review it and look at as many angles as you want to look at, as many times as you want to look at it, we should not be sitting here having to issue a statement as the SEC did Saturday night going, hey, replay screwed that up. Like, what do you got replay for? I mean, how can they miss that? We saw it in the NFL. I thought replay missed a couple of key things in the NFL on Sunday as well. I'm not sure what the replay guys are doing to not fix wrongs on the field, or in some cases turn a right into a wrong, from what the calls are being made. All right, that's my last diatribe on that. Quickly on the two recruiting questions. Austin, is this game a big deal for Walter Nolan, or is that stuff overblown?
Overblown. I mean, I'm not saying the kid can't end up at Florida. I'm
Right.
just saying,
but not based on this game.
No, I mean nobody's going to a school based off any particular game. I just think that again, it's all a show, and we've said that for the longest time. I mean, the top three changed. He went to Michigan; they're not even in the top three. Florida's out of the top three. Then he goes down there, and now he's loving them up. It's just part of the charm.
All right. Anything else of note in recruiting?
No,
that's pretty slow.
It's really slow. I mean, like I wish there was. It's no juice at all.
Right, and it's 2 away games for Tennessee, so nobody's coming to campus, obviously in the next few weeks. So it's going to be mid-October before anything potentially gets cranked back up for Tennessee. Certainly a strong showing for Tennessee would not hurt them in recruiting if they could do that this weekend. All right, Rob, on the hoops front, they got your man in this past weekend. Not your man, but the guy that's highly talked about. You had a chance to visit with him, but what's the story on the latest 5-star to visit?
I mean, talking about Case and Wallace, and
Yep.
The story's the same that I've been putting out there for several weeks now. I think it's just an absolute dogfight with Kentucky. I couldn't call it right now. I think Tennessee. I mean, I do not side with all of these. I mean, there's a lot of people out there in the basketball recruiting world that say he's a Kentucky lock, and I've put this on the message board. But I've met the young man. I've met his parents. They're not the kind of people that are going to waste Rick Barnes and his entire staff's time and money bringing the kid up here if it's over. I mean, I don't believe that for a second. Now he may end up at Kentucky, but I don't remotely think that decision has already been made, because again, that family is just not the type that is going to string people along with taking 3 airplane tickets and a bunch of free food and hotel rooms this weekend, and wasted the staff's time when they could be focusing recruiting on other kids. They're just not they're not those type of folks. So it's just I think Texas is out. I think that was a courtesy visit to the in-state school. And we're gonna have to wait till November, which I was kind of surprised about. I would have thought the kid would have wanted to get it over with and get it out there, but he told me he's not going to make an announcement until it's time to commit and sign the first week in November. Now maybe he gets so much pressure and attention that he walks that back a little bit. But for now, looks like we're gonna have to wait a few weeks.
Big advantage for Tennessee that they got 2 official visits. They're the only one to get 2 official visits. Or do you think that Kentucky, Tennessee's obviously established in there, and this is just a dogfight?
Yeah, I think it's an advantage, but I don't think it's a huge advantage. And here's another thing: I think he should, in my opinion, have gotten the impression that he is a huge priority for Tennessee. Coach has been able to get out on the road now for a couple of weeks. Rick Barnes, as well as assistants, have been to the school every chance they have gotten to since the live contact period opened up. Calipari's been once. Other times he just sent an assistant. Now, is that a huge thing? I don't know, but I think it would have sent a message if it was me.
Yeah, it could be a bigger deal than getting the 2 official visits.
And I do think that's a big deal, but I think it would be a bigger deal if you had him in for the second visit, and he was going to decide like next week.
Yeah. Okay.
Instead, I think the fact that he's waiting over a month, I think kind of lessens the impact of that a little bit.
Well, we'll see what happens with that. We'll see if Tennessee can get some football recruiting juice going at some time over the course of the next month. And obviously, we'll see if Tennessee can prove themselves better than the odds makers have them this weekend as they travel to Florida as heavy underdogs to take on the Florida Gators. That's going to do it for this Tuesday edition of the Volquest.com podcast presented by Smoky Mountain Organics. For Rob Lewis and Austin Price, I'm Brett Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest podcast every week here on Volquest.